Welcome to our podcast, and this week at London Visited, we go to part 1 of the Tube to tell you all about this iconic transport system that is the heart of London. We'll look back at its history and tell you some great facts about the London Underground system that is used by so many people each and every day. My name is Steve, and each week I will bring to you the facts, history and information about different parts of this great capital. If you have been to London, are planning on visiting, live here, or just love London from afar, then this is the podcast for you. Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel, London Visited, to see videos covering this and so many others across London. Now, to this week's podcast. The London Underground, also known simply as the Underground, or by its nickname the Tube, is a public transport system serving Greater London in England and some parts of the adjacent countries of Buckinghamshire, Essex and Hertfordshire. The Underground has its origins in the Metropolitan Railway, the world's first underground passenger railway. Opened in January 1863, it is now part of the Circle, Hammersmith and City and Metropolitan lines. The first line to operate underground electric traction trains, the City and South London Railway, in 1890, is now part of the Northern Line. The network has expanded to 11 lines, and in 2017-18 carried 1.4 billion passengers, making it the world's 11th busiest metro system. The 11 lines collectively handle up to 5 million passengers a day. The system's first tunnels were built just below the surface, using the cut and cover method. Later, smaller, roughly cut circular tunnels, which gave rise to its nickname, the Tube, were dug through at a deeper level. The system's got 270 stations and 250 miles, 400 kilometres of track. Despite its name, only 45% of the system is underground in tunnels, with much of the network in the outer environments of London being on the surface. In addition, the Underground does not cover most southern parts of Greater London. There are only 29 stations south of the River Thames. The early tube lines, originally owned by several private companies, were brought together under the Underground brand in the earlier 20th century, and eventually merged along with the subsurface lines and bus services in 1933 to form London Transport, under the control of the London Passenger Transport Board, the LPTB. As of 2015, 92% of operational expenditure is covered by passenger fares. The travel card ticket was introduced in 1983, and Oyster, a contactless ticketing system, in 2003. Contactless card payments were introduced in 2014, the first public transport system in the world to do so. The LPTB was a prominent patron of art and design, commissioning many new station buildings, posters and public artworks in a modernist style. The schematic tube map, designed by Harry Beck in 1931, was voted a national design icon in 2006, and now includes other TfL transport systems, such as the Docklands Light Railway, London Overground, Crossrail, which is officially called the Elizabeth Line, and Tramlink. Other famous London Underground branding includes the Roundel and Johnson typeface, created by Edward Johnson in 1916. The idea of an underground railway linking the City of London with the urban centre was proposed in the 1830s, and the Metropolitan Railway was granted permission to build such a line in 1854. To prepare construction, a short test tunnel was built in 1855 in Kibblesworth, Tyne and Wear, a small town with geological properties similar to London. The test tunnel was used for 2 years in the development of the first underground train, and was later, in 1861, filled up. The world's first underground railway, it opened up in January 1863 between Paddington and Farringdon, using gas-lit wooden carriages, hauled by steam locomotives. It was hailed as a success, carrying 38,000 passengers on the opening day, and borrowing trains from other railways to supplement the service. The Metropolitan District Railway, commonly known as the District Railway, opened in December 1868 from South Kensington to Westminster as part of a plan for an underground inner circle, connecting London's mainline stations. The Metropolitan and District Railways completed the Circle Line in 1884, built using the cut and cover method. Both railways expanded, the district building 5 branches to the west, reaching Ealing, Hounslow, Uxbridge, Richmond and Wimbledon, and the Metropolitan Railway eventually extended as far as Verney Junction in Buckinghamshire, more than 50 miles, 80 kilometres from Baker Street and the centre of London. For the first deep level tube line, the City and South London Railway, 2 10 feet 2 inches, 3.1 metres diameter circular tunnels were dug between King William Street, close to today's Monument Station, and Stockwell, under the roads to avoid the need for agreement with the owners of the property on the surface. This opened in 1890, with electric locomotives that hauled carriages with small opaque windows, nicknamed padded cells. The Waterloo and City Railway opened in 1898, followed by the Central London Railway in 1900, known as the Twopenny Tube. These two ran electric trains in circular tunnels having diameters between 11 feet 8 inches, 3.56 metres, and 12 feet, 2.5 inches, 3.72 metres. Whereas the Great Northern and City Railway, which opened in 1904, was built to take main line trains from Finsbury Park to Moorgate Terminus in the city and had a 16-foot, 4.9 metre diameter tunnels. While steam locomotives were in use on the Underground, there were contrasting health reports. There were many incidents of passengers collapsing whilst travelling, due to the heat and pollution, leading for calls to clean the air through the installation of garden plants. The Metropolitan even encouraged beards for staff to act as an air filter. There were other reports claiming beneficial outcomes of using the Underground, including the designation of Great Portland Street as a sanatorium for sufferers of asthma and bronchial complaints. Tonsillitis could be cured with acid gas, and the Twopenny Tube cured anorexia. With the advent of electric tube services, the Waterloo and City Railway and the Great Northern and City Railway, the Vaux Electric Railway in Brighton, and competition for electric trams, the pioneering underground companies needed modernising. In the early 20th century, the District and Metropolitan Railways needed to electrify, and a joint committee recommended an AC, alternating current, system. The two companies cooperated because of the shared ownership of the inner circle. The district needed to raise the finance necessary, found an investor in the American Charles Yerkes, who favoured a DC direct current system, similar to that in use on the City and South London and Central London railways. The Metropolitan Railway protested about the change of plan, but after arbitration by the Board of Trade, the DC system was adopted. Yerkes soon had control of the District Railway and established the Underground Electric Railways Company of London, UERL, in 1902 to finance and operate 3 tube lines: the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway, Bakerloo, the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway, Hampstead, and the Great Northern, Piccadilly and Brompton Railway, Piccadilly, which all opened between 1906 and 1907. When the Bakerloo was so named in July 1906, the Railway magazine called it an undignified gutter title. By 1907, the District and Metropolitan Railways had electrified the underground sections of their lines. In January 1913, the UERL acquired the Central London Railway and the City and South London Railway, as well as many of London's bus and tram operators. Only the Metropolitan Railway, along with its subsidiaries, the Great Northern and City Railway, and the East London Railway, and the Waterloo and City Railway, by then owned by the Main Line, London and South Western Railway, remained outside the Underground Group's control. A joint marketing agreement between most of the companies in the early years of the 20th century included maps, joint publicity through ticketing and underground signs, incorporating the first bullseye symbol, outside stations in central London. At the time, the term Underground was selected from 3 other proposed names. Tube and Electric were both officially rejected. Ironically, the term Tube was later adopted alongside the Underground. The Bakerloo line was extended north to Queen's Park to join a new electric line from Euston to Watford, but World War I delayed construction and trains reached Watford Junction in 1917. During air raids in 1915, people used the tube stations as shelters. An extension of the Central Line west to Ealing was also delayed by the war and was completed in 1920. After the war, government-backed financial guarantees were used to expand the network, and the tunnels of the City and South London and Hampstead railways were linked at Euston and Kennington. The combined service was not named the Northern Line until later. The Metropolitan promoted housing estates near the railway with a Metro Land brand, and 9 housing estates were built near stations on the line. Electrification was extended north from Harrow to Rickmansworth, and branches opened from Rickmansworth to Watford in 1925, and from Wembley Park to Stanmore in 1932. The Piccadilly line was extended north to Cockfosters and took over District line branches to Harrow, later Uxbridge and Hounslow. In 1933, most of the London Underground's railways, tramway and bus services were merged to form the London Passenger Transport Board, which used the London Transport brand. The Waterloo and City Railway, which was by then in the ownership of the mainline Southern Railway, remained with its existing owners. In the same year that the London Passenger Transport Board was formed, Harry Beck's diagrammatic tube map first appeared. In the following years, the outlying lines of the former Metropolitan Railway closed. The Brill Tramway in 1935, and the line from Quainton Road to Verney Junction in 1936. The 1935-40 New Works programme included the extension of the Central and Northern lines, and the Bakerloo line to take over the Metropolitan's Stanmore branch. World War II suspended these plans after the Bakerloo line had reached Stanmore, and the Northern line, High Barnet and Mill Hill East in 1941. Following bombing in 1940, passenger services over the West London line were suspended, leaving Olympia Exhibition Centre without a railway service until a District line shuttle from Earls Court began after the war. After work restarted on the Central line, extensions in East and West London, these were complete in 1949. During the war, many tube stations were used as air raid shelters. On the 3rd of March 1943, a test of the air raid warning signs, together with the firing of a new type of anti-aircraft rocket, resulted in a crush of people attempting to take shelter in Bethnal Green Underground Station. A total of 173 people, including 62 children, died, making this both the worst civilian disaster of World War II and the largest loss of life in a single incident on the London Underground network. On the 1st of January 1948, under the provisions of Transport Act 1947, the London Passenger Transport Board was nationalised and renamed the London Transport Executive, becoming a subsidiary transport organisation of the British Transport Commission, which was formed on the same day. Under the same act, the country's mainline railways were also nationalised, and their reconstruction was given priority over the maintenance of the Underground, and most of the unfinished plans of the pre-war New Works programme were shelved or postponed. The District line needed new trains, and an unpainted aluminium train entered service in 1953, this becoming the standard for new trains. In the early 1960s, the Metropolitan line was electrified as far as Amersham, British Railways providing services for the former Metropolitan line stations between Amersham and Aylesbury. In 1962, the British Transport Commission was abolished and the London Transport Executive was renamed the London Transport Board, reporting directly to the Minister of Transport. Unlike during the 1960s, the Victoria line was dug under central London and, unlike the earlier tunnels, did not follow the roads above. The line opened in 1968 to 1971, with trains being given automatically and magnetically encoded tickets, collected by the automatic gates, gave access to the platforms. On the 1st of January 1970, responsibility for public transport within Greater London passed from central government to local government, in the form of the Greater London Council, the GLC, and the London Transport Board was abolished. The London Transport brand continued to be used by the GLC. On the 28th of February 1975, a southbound train on the Northern City line failed to stop at its Moorgate terminus and crashed into a wall at the end of the tunnel in the Moorgate tube crash. There were 43 deaths and 74 injuries, the greatest loss of life during peacetime on the London Underground. In 1976, the Northern City line was taken over by British Rail and linked up with the main line at Finsbury Park, a transfer that had already been planned prior to the accident.
Hi there, and thanks so much for listening to this podcast on the history of London.
And if you're enjoying this, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Now, if you want to get more involved with London Visited, don't forget you can join us as a member by going to patreon.com/London Visited with so many different benefits. Or you could purchase a 4K photograph of London from our website, londonvisited.co.uk, both of which support us and keep the channel going. Once again, thanks for listening. And now, back to the podcast. In 1979, another new tube, the Jubilee Line, named in honour of Queen Elizabeth's Silver Jubilee, took over the Stanmore branch from the Bakerloo Line, linking it to a newly constructed tube between Baker Street and Charing Cross stations. Under the control of the GLC, London Transport introduced a system of fare zones for buses and underground trains that cut the average fare in 1981. Fares increased following a legal challenge, but the fare zones were retained, and in the mid-1980s, the travel card and the capital card were introduced. In 1984, control of London buses and London Underground passed back to the central government with the creation of the London Regional Transport, LRT, which reported directly to the Secretary of State for Transport, still retaining the London Transport brand. One-person operation had been planned in 1968, but conflict with the trade unions delayed introduction until the 1980s. On the 18th of November 1987, fire broke out in an escalator at King's Cross St Pancras tube station. The resulting fire cost the lives of 31 people and injured a further 100. London Underground was strongly criticised in the aftermath for their attitude to fires underground, and publication of the report into the fire led to the resignation of senior management of both London Underground and London Regional Transport. To comply with new safety regulations issued as a result of the fire, and to combat graffiti, a train refurbishment project was launched in July 1991. In April 1994, the Waterloo and City Line, by then owned by British Rail and known as the Waterloo and City Line, was transferred to the London Underground. In 1999, the Jubilee Line was extended from Green Park Station through Docklands to Stratford Station, resulting in the closure of a short section of tunnel between Green Park and Charing Cross stations, and included the first stations on the Underground to have platform edge doors. Transport for London, TfL, was created in 2000 and replaced London Regional Transport. Electronic ticketing in the form of contactless Oyster card was introduced in 2003. London Underground services on the East London Line ceased in 2007, so that it could be extended and converted to London Overground operation. And in December 2009, the Circle Line changed from serving a closed loop around the centre of London to a spiral also serving Hammersmith. Since September 2014, passengers have been able to use contactless cards on the tube. Their use has grown very quickly, and now over 1 million contactless transactions are made on the Underground every day. The Underground serves 270 stations. 16 Underground stations are outside Greater London, 8 on the Metropolitan Line and 8 on the Central Line. Of these, 5, Amersham, Chalfont and Latimer, Chesham and Chorley Wood on the Metropolitan Line and Epping on the Central Line, are beyond the M25. London Underground's 11 lines total 402 kilometres, 250 miles, in length, making it the 4th longest metro system in the world. These are made up of the subsurface network and the deep tube lines. The Circle, District, Hammersmith and City and Metropolitan lines form the subsurface network, with railway tunnels just below the surface. The Hammersmith and City and Circle lines share stations and most of their track with each other, as well as with the Metropolitan and District lines. The Bakerloo, Central, Jubilee, Northern, Piccadilly, Victoria and Waterloo and City lines are deep-level tubes, with smaller trains that run in 2 circular tunnels, tubes, with a diameter about 11 feet 8 inches, 3.56 metres. 55% of the system runs on the surface. There are 20 miles, 32 kilometres of cut and cover tunnel, and 93 miles, 150 kilometres of tube tunnel. Many of the central London Underground stations on the deep-level tube routes are higher than the running lines to assist deceleration when arriving and acceleration when departing. The lines are electrified with a 4-rail DC system. A conductor rail between the rails is energised at minus 210 volts, and the rail outside the running lines at plus 420 volts, giving a potential difference of 630 volts. The average speed on the Underground is 20.5 miles per hour, 33 kilometres per hour. Outside of the tunnels of central London, many trains tend to travel at over 40 miles per hour, 64 kilometres per hour, in the suburban and countryside areas. The Metropolitan line can reach speeds of 62 miles per hour, 100 kilometres per hour. The London Underground is used by approximately 1.4 billion passengers per year. London Underground trains come in two sizes: larger subsurface trains and smaller deep tube trains. Since the early 1960s, all passenger trains have been electric multiple units with sliding doors, and a train last ran with a guard in 2000. All lines use fixed-length trains with between 6 and 8 cars, except for the Waterloo and City line that uses 4 cars. New trains are designed for maximum number of standing passengers, and for speed of access to the cars have regenerative braking and public address systems. Since 1999, all new stock has had to comply with accessibility regulations that require such things as access and room for wheelchairs, and the size and location of door controls. The Underground is served by the following depots: Bakerloo Line, Stonebridge Park, Queen's Park, London Road. Central Line, Hainault, Ruislip, Y-City. Circle Line, Hammersmith. District Line, Ealing Common, Hammersmith, Upminster. Hammersmith and City, Hammersmith. Jubilee, Neasden, Stratford Market. Metropolitan Line, Neasden. Northern Line, Edgware, Golders Green, Highgate, Morden. Piccadilly Line, Cockfosters, Northfields. Victoria Line, Northumberland Park. Waterloo and City Line, Waterloo. In the years since the first parts of the London Underground were open, many stations and routes have been closed. Some stations were closed because of low passenger numbers, rendering them uneconomical. Some became redundant after lines were rerouted or replacements were constructed, and others no longer served by the Underground but remain open to National Rail mainline services. In some cases, such as Aldwych, the buildings remain and are used for other purposes. In others, such as the British Museum, all evidence of the station has been lost through demolition. When the Bakerloo line opened in 1906, it was advertised with a maximum temperature of 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees centigrade. But over time, the tube tunnels have warmed. In 1938, approval was given for a ventilation improvement programme, and a refrigeration unit was installed in the lift shaft at Tottenham Court Road. Temperatures of 47 degrees Celsius, 117 degrees Fahrenheit, were reported in the 2006 European heatwave. It was claimed in 2002 that if animals were being transported, temperatures on the tube would break European Commission animal welfare laws. A study in the year 2000 reported that air quality was 73 times worse than at street level, with a passenger breathing the same mass of particulates during a 20-minute journey on the Northern Line as when smoking a cigarette. The main purpose of the London Underground's ventilation fans is to extract hot air from the tunnels, and fans across the network are being refurbished, although complaints of noise from local residents stop their use at full power at night. In June 2006, a groundwater cooling system was installed at Victoria Station. In 2012, air cooling units were installed on platforms at Green Park Station, using cool deep groundwater, and at Oxford Circus using chiller units at the top of an adjacent building. New air-conditioned trains are being introduced on subsurface lines, but space is limited on tube trains for air conditioning units, as these would heat the tunnels even more. The Deep Tube programme, investigating replacing the trains for the Bakerloo, Central, Waterloo and City and Piccadilly lines, is looking for trains with better energy conservation and regenerative braking, on which it might be possible to install a form of air conditioning. In the original tube design, trains passing through close-fitted tunnels act as pistons to create air pressure gradients between stations. This pressure difference drives ventilation between platforms and the surface exits through the passenger foot network. This system depends on adequate cross-sectional area of the airspace above the passengers' heads in the foot tunnels and escalators. It also depends on an absence of turbulence in the tunnel headspace. In many stations, the ventilation system is now ineffective because of alterations that reduce tunnel diameters and increase turbulence. An example is Green Park Tube Station, where false ceiling panels attached to metal frames have been installed that reduce the above-head airspace diameter by more than half in many parts. This has the effect of reducing airflow by 94%. Originally, air turbulence was kept to a minimum by keeping all signage flat to the tunnel walls. Now, the ventilation space above head height is crowded with ducting, conduits, cameras, speakers and equipment acting as baffle plates with predictable reductions in flow. Often, electronic signs have their flat surface at right angles to the main airflow, causing choked flow. Temporary signboards that stand at the top of escalators also maximise turbulence. The alterations to the ventilation system are important, not only to heat exchange, but also to the quality of air at platform level. Originally, access to the deep tube platforms was by a lift. Each lift was staffed, and at some quiet stations in the 1920s, the ticket office was moved into the lift, or it was arranged that the lift could be controlled from the ticket office. The first escalator on the London Underground was installed in 1911 between the District and Piccadilly platforms at Earl's Court, and from the following year, new deep-level stations were provided with escalators instead of lifts. The escalators had a diagonal shunt at the top landing. In 1921, a recorded voice instructed passengers to stand on the right, and signs followed in World War II. Travellers were asked to stand on the right so that anyone wishing to overtake them would have a clear passage on the left side of the escalator. The first comb-type escalator was installed in 1924 at Clapham Common. In the 1920s and 1930s, many lifts were replaced by escalators. After the fatal 1987 King's Cross fire, all wooden escalators were replaced with metal ones, and the mechanisms were regularly degreased to lower the potential for fires. The only wooden escalator not to be replaced was at Greenford Station, which remained until October 2015, when TfL replaced it with the first incline lift on the UK transport network. There are 426 escalators on the London Underground system, and the longest, at 60 metres, 200 feet, is at Angel. The shortest, at Stratford, gives a vertical rise of 4.1 metres, 13 feet. There are 184 lifts, and the numbers have increased in recent years because of investment making tube stations accessible. Over 28 stations will have lifts installed over the next 10 years, bringing the total of step-free stations to over 100. In mid-2012, London Underground, in partnership with Virgin Media, tried out Wi-Fi hotspots in many stations, but not in the tunnels, that allowed passengers free internet access. The free trial proved successful and was extended to the end of 2012, whereupon it switched to a service freely available to subscribers of Virgin Media and others, or as a paid-for service. It is not currently possible to use mobile phones underground, using native 2G, 3G or 4G networks, and a project to extend coverage before the 2012 Olympics was abandoned, because of commercial and technical difficulties. UK subscribers to the 3 network can use the InTouch app to route their voice calls and text messages via the Virgin Media Wi-Fi network at 138 London transport stations. The EE network has also recently released a Wi-Fi calling feature available on the iPhone. So, I hope you've enjoyed our in-depth Part 1 look at the London Underground. Do come back soon, when Part 2 will be available, when we'll look into future plans and other things going on the London Underground. Whatever podcast service you use to listen to this, please do subscribe to get updates on new shows, and also please leave us some feedback. Please let me know any places you'd like us to feature in future podcasts by emailing me directly on londonvisited@gmail.com or contacting us on Twitter and Instagram @LondonVisited or on Facebook @The London Visited. Thanks for listening, and I hope you really enjoyed our podcast. We'll see you soon, and don't forget, number 2 is just around the corner.